Imagine living in a world where a shadow lurks in the dark, a monster stalking the streets, leaving fear in its wake. That's the chilling reality of the Rostov Ripper. That shadow had a name, Andrei Chikatilo. Meet Andrei Chikatilo, a man whose unassuming life concealed a horrifying truth, transforming him into one of the most infamous serial killers in modern history. Buckle up, because this story is anything but ordinary. His story begins in a small Ukrainian village in 1936, born into a time of devastating famine. From the start, Chikatilo's life was marked by hardship and a sense of inadequacy. He was a weak and sickly child, often bullied by his peers. He suffered from chronic bedwetting well into his adult years, a source of immense shame and humiliation. His school years were a struggle. He was socially awkward, unable to form meaningful connections, and was seen as an outsider. This deep-seated feeling of being a failure, of being invisible and powerless, would fester within him for decades. Decades of shame, weakness, and rejection were quietly fermenting into something far more dangerous. As a young man, Chikatilo tried to build a normal life. He pursued an education, got married, had children, and even became a teacher. On the surface, he was just another face in the crowd, a seemingly harmless, if somewhat bumbling, family man and Communist Party member. He taught Russian language and literature, a position of respect. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a dark storm was brewing. His attempts at a normal, intimate life were fraught with failure, feeding his rage and feelings of emasculation. He was fired from his teaching job after allegations of inappropriate behavior with students surfaced, a major blow to his already fragile ego. This was the moment when his last connection to a normal life snapped. This series of personal and professional failures pushed him further into a fantasy world, one where he was not the victim, but the one in control. Forced to take a job as a supply clerk, Chikatilo found a new sense of freedom. His work required him to travel frequently by train across various regions of the Soviet Union. This constant movement provided him with the perfect cover. He wasn't just traveling, he was disappearing. He became a ghost, a predator moving through the system, preying on the vulnerable at train stations and bus stops. His reign of terror began in 1978. His victims were often runaways, homeless individuals, and sex workers, and because they lived on society's margins, no one connected the dots. Whose disappearances might go unnoticed for some time. He would lure them with promises of food, money, or a drink, using his non-threatening, almost pathetic appearance to his advantage. Once he had them in a secluded area, often a wooded spot near the railway lines he knew so well, the friendly façade would shatter, and the monster within would emerge. The brutality of his crimes was shocking. The level of violence inflicted upon his victims was extreme, leaving even seasoned detectives horrified. For 12 long years he continued his spree. The investigation code named Lesopolosa, or Forest Strip, was one of the largest in Soviet history, but it was plagued with problems from the very beginning. Why was he so difficult to catch? Several factors played into this. First, the Soviet Union at the time officially maintained that this type of crime serial murder was a decadent Western phenomenon that couldn't happen in their socialist society. This denial created a major roadblock. Police departments in different regions rarely communicated or shared information, meaning they failed to connect the dots between crimes that were clearly the work of one person. Chikatilo was killing across multiple jurisdictions, and the lack of a centralized database or coordinated effort worked in his favor. Forensic science was also lagging. A crucial mistake was made early on regarding his blood type. A sample left at a crime scene was identified as type AB, but Chikatilo's blood type was A. It was later discovered that he had a rare condition where his blood and semen had different blood group antigens. A scientific anomaly that threw investigators off his trail for years. In simple terms, the science lied, and the killer walked free. He was even arrested and questioned in the mid-1980s. But because his blood type didn't match the evidence on file, he was released. The monster had been caught, and then set free. Imagine that the monster was in their hands and they let him go. The investigation became a desperate manhunt. Thousands of officers were involved, and over 150,000 people were questioned. They even brought in a psychiatrist to create a psychological profile of the killer, a relatively new technique in the Soviet Union at the time. The profile was surprisingly accurate, describing an educated married man, likely with children and a history of sexual dysfunction. It pointed them towards someone like Chikatilo, but the faulty blood evidence kept him safe. Finally, in November 1990, the net began to close. Increased police presence at train stations made Chikatilo nervous. After committing his final murder, he was spotted by a police officer emerging from a wooded area near a train stop, looking suspicious. The officer stopped him, checked his documents, and let him go, but noted his name. When the victim's body was discovered nearby a few days later, the officer remembered the man he had stopped. That man was Andrei Chikatilo. For the first time in 12 years, the shadow had nowhere left to hide. This time the arrest stuck. The new lead investigator, Kostoev, decided to ignore the previous forensic blunders and focus on psychological tactics. Over days of intense interrogation, Kostoev and his team slowly broke down Chikatilo's defenses. They talked to him, not as a monster, but as a man trying to understand his tormented mind. Finally, Chikatilo began to confess. And once he started, he couldn't stop. He led investigators to burial sites, recounting his crimes in chilling, emotionless detail. He confessed to at least 56 murders, though he was convicted of 52. His trial was a media sensation, a spectacle of horror that captivated a nation already reeling from the collapse of the Soviet Union. He was kept in a cage in the courtroom to protect him from the enraged families of his victims. He behaved erratically, shouting, singing, and making bizarre claims. In 1992, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. On February 14, 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed by a single gunshot to the back of the head. The case of Andrei Chikatilo is a horrifying look into the depths of human depravity. It's also a stark reminder of how a system's denial and inefficiency can allow a predator to operate unchecked for years, leaving an unimaginable wake of destruction and grief. His story serves as a chilling lesson that monsters can wear the most ordinary of masks. Stories like this remind us that monsters don't look like monsters. If you want more true stories that expose the darkness behind ordinary faces, subscribe to Shadow Lore. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and see you next time.